Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are getting into Alex and Ada Volume 2, which, by the way, mycomicshop.com actually has the listing typed out as Alex plus Ada, Plus. And I was
really?
like, yeah.
Oh, that's weird.
Well, but that was, I can't remember if that was on air or not, but I was opining about that. I thought at the end of the last episode where I was like, I wonder if you're also kind of supposed to say it like puzzle pieces, like the two of them fit together, Alex plus Ada. And I ultimately decided that was stupid and abandoned it.
Well, now that you're saying it, is it supposed to be Red Alex plus Ada?
That's what I'm debating. Is it Alex plus Ada?
Oh, that hurts my brain now. I've never thought of it that way until just now. Obviously it is a plus sign, and anywhere you see it, anywhere it's listed, it normally is Alex plus sign Ada, but I've always read it as Alex and Ada. I've never
Me
saw
too,
it as
because,
Alex plus Ada.
one, the alliteration.
Yeah,
Alex,
that is true.
Alex and Ada.
Yeah.
Just flows really nicely. But so I think there's at least an argument out there. However, it would not be the first time that someone doing manual database entry at mycomicshop.com went a little rogue.
Yeah.
It happens. And I think their system, like, the search function on their site, now I'm getting into my day job of programming, but the plus function probably adds specifications to the search parameter. So they couldn't do that.
True. Yeah.
And I think they probably felt, well, it's not an ampersand.
Yeah.
It's a plus sign. So we shouldn't put an ampersand in. We can't use an actual plus sign. So we're going to write the word plus out. But I mean, the fact that
that's a fair assessment.
No one else does it.
Yeah.
But anyway,
didn't think about the search aspect of it.
I know. Yeah. Well, now I want to I kind of want to troll people with that. Like, have you read Alex plus Ada? And just bring it on. Let's have this debate every time we talk about the book. Anyway, now I'm afraid to say it. Volume 2.
Just skip past it. You know what book we're reading.
Issues 6 through 10, Volume 2. Giving off very strong. I'm just adding to the list of comps here. God Loves, Man Kills comp.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Which, not quite at that level, but
it's the same idea. Same
God
base
Loves,
idea.
Man Kills has the advantage of standing on the shoulders of a long existing IP.
Yeah.
And you get to tell a story in that universe. Whereas Alex Ada is just, it has to write the universe and the premise and the characters and deliver it all at the same time.
But it's the same idea, mutants they're hated and feared by the world.
And the government really steps up.
Exactly. Yeah. They step up with a specific crackdown on them. They're what they're trying to show and what they've seeded, and you can make this fairly easy inference in Alex and Ada is that many people in the general public hate and fear androids because of the history they've laid out in the news broadcasts, right? The Next Wave massacre, there was the incident at the rock concert,
right?
And so it all builds towards that press conference from who was it? Someone in the cabinet saying, there's going to be an intense crackdown on.
I was going to say who it was. It was like the Attorney General, right?
I think it was the Attorney General. Yeah. But it leads to that of a government crackdown, and it is, as we mentioned several times last week, the idea of all these stories just being a metaphor for our society, how we treat otherness in our society, and it's kind of an inevitable outcome. Again, none of these story beats should be surprising anybody who's read any sort of fiction about androids and AI and things like that, right? This is an inevitable outcome. It's all about, do you care enough about these characters, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think yes. I think it's still bringing something new to the table. I think because Ada is so aimless, it's almost like like the movies of like the Hunger Games depicted a little differently. But I think they still get it. But if you read the Hunger Games books, you know that Katniss has no interest in starting a revolution. Like
Mhm.
she literally just wants to be left alone. Like her only motivation for doing anything, and yet everyone around her is like, "Oh, you could be a symbol of this, and we could do
Yeah.
this, and we could do this." Everyone has their own agenda, and they kind of
Big
use
time,
her.
big time reluctant hero stuff in that book.
Yeah, and I think Ada is like, you know, well, I don't want to be on house arrest. You know, I want to be able to live my life a little bit, but doesn't really know. It's like she's like, well, I think I like Alex, so maybe I'll try that. And then it was like, well, I guess I'll go to like the bot refuge place
Yeah,
in New
yeah,
Mexico.
yeah.
And then it was like, oh, now I'm in trouble with the FBI, so just
So,
drink some sugar water like a hummingbird.
yeah, well, you just need quick energy. But I do wonder though, because that Alex has a conversation with her about what she remembers prior to being woken up, and Ada responds basically like, "Yeah, I remember all the events that happened. Like I could lay them out
But it's just
chronologically and
data.
sequentially, but there's
Yeah.
no attachment to them. But she does remember them and can recall them. So I wonder, let's say like Alex's grandma at this point decided to wake up her X5, an X5 she's
I
had
had the
for
same question. Yeah.
significantly longer. What would his transition be like into sentient life with, you know, who knows how long years, couple years, whatever the time frame is, it's way longer than the handful of days that Alex has had Ada,
Right.
right? So how does that lived experience translate to when they're woken up? Does that make it easier on them because they have more familiarity with the world? Because Ada knows literally nothing of the world.
Right. I was thinking mostly from the vantage point of, is that what made um Ada more open to or willing to or eager to stay with Alex? Like
Yeah.
you know, if his grandma were to unleash the sentience of her bot, and even if he was just reviewing that data in an attached way, was like, I was basically a non-consensual sex slave for a bunch of years. I think I'm gonna see what else is out there. I think I'm gonna
Or,
leave the house and
I
see.
mean, in fairness, though, the flip side is maybe I was, but I was treated well. I was never abused, things like that, you know? And Alex brings up that point, though, in that kind of conversation before she leaves, when he's like, I think you need to go and experience the world.
Yeah.
To which Ada responds like, that's not fair. You know, you woke me up and now you're saying, you're basically washing your hands of it. Like, okay, I did this to you now, essentially, but now you have to go and do all these other things on your own out in the world that is increasingly more dangerous for you. So, no, I wonder about that. If whatever naivete she has is inherent in all the androids that are woken up with sentient life, has that part unlocked in them, or is it simply because she is literally a couple days quote unquote old?
I think it's because she's such a clean slate.
Yeah,
Um,
I get that sense as well. That's kind of how I read it. That it is that if it was an android that had more life experience just around and interacting with the world and knowing how to interact with the world as an android, like Ada's first contact with the outside world as an android is after she's been woken up, essentially. You know,
right.
so for her to try and emulate what she was supposed to do, she didn't have a lot of experience with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, the fact that she can't pass as human or non-sentient
Yeah,
is like just the worst of all possible scenarios.
yeah, yeah.
Because she's not observed humans enough
Mhm.
to behave humanly.
Mhm.
And you could see she was like really locked in
Mhm.
on his grandma's robot
Yeah.
at dinner, like trying to
Daniel,
mirror
I think,
Yeah.
yeah. Which is
Trying,
why I ask if Daniel were unlocked, he would have those memories of like, this is how I'm supposed to act. When I do this, this is how humans respond. That's why I wonder if it would be easier for an
I think it
android
would
in
be
his
easier.
situation.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Um,
To cover it up, to cover it up.
That said, she's a very quick learner. She has just chosen to spend her time learning about Kama Sutra and
Yeah.
romance novels and,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
very,
Trying every food on the planet.
right, smelling everything, touching
Yes.
everything.
Yeah. Cataloging everything he owns. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, well, that's like getting a new cat. Is like
Yeah.
you just go around, smell everything, lay on every surface, find all the comfy spots.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that I've seen this before. Um, but yeah, I think I figured out what it is that really draws me to Luna's art.
Okay.
Because I was chewing on it after last week. I was like, I think everything you were saying is fair. I think there is the big distinction between his cover art and his sequential art, which I attribute to just the time available for
Probably. Yeah.
production. But I think what draws me to it is the like the symmetrical framing and shots. It to me it's like watching a Wes Anderson movie where like everything is like inhumanly ornately arranged and people are standing with very specific postures, a perfect distance apart, and it'll be 4 frames in a row where there's really
Hmm.
only one movement. Someone will
Hmm.
raise a hand and then it'll go back down, and that kind of like overly choreographed, behavior uh, that feels odd, but very stylized, very intentional. I think is kind of what drew me to Luna's art, and I wasn't looking so much at the character faces. I was kind of letting the experience of the way that works sequentially just kind of wash over me. But yeah, I,
No,
I did see there is the scene where they like hold hands when they go somewhere together, and I
in the
was like,
form. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And interlocking fingers are pretty hard to draw, especially for like a single panel on a single page of a single issue of comic.
Yeah.
Um, that's quite the task they set themselves there. But you know, I felt like I was a little more aware of the art this time through, just from our discussion.
I will say though, I think your observation is correct, and I think that's it's obviously intentional how every panel is framed. There's not a lot of I don't know, we'll call them like crane shots or whatever, where we're moving perspective a lot. You're right. There is a lot of back and forth where our two characters or three characters are in the same positions. And maybe, yeah, there's a head turn, there's a subtle eye movement kind of thing, but they're effectively stationary and you're not moving with characters a lot.
Right.
It is a very like Kevin Smith, we're gonna put the camera here and just shoot, and there's two people talking in a frame. Like forget master, forget their coverage. It's just here's just two people talking,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that's all
and
we're
like
seeing.
and as you pointed out last time, there's not a lot of set pieces.
Hmm.
I was like, this would actually make a pretty great Wes Anderson movie because there's like 3 or 4 set pieces, and it's
Yeah.
like characters sitting on a couch, characters sitting in the room,
Hmm.
all taupe walls behind
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
very
Yeah.
easy, um, a very like constrained and consistent color palette,
Hmm.
except when they go online. I feel like the colors open
Yes.
a lot
It's
more there.
and that that's probably an intentional thing. Like when you go into the prime, whatever, it's like this bright blue, like loading screen.
Yeah.
And that obviously very much jumps out after you're seeing a lot of kind of muted earthy tones, a lot of grays and browns and taupes and
Yeah.
deep reds and things like that.
And
Yeah.
again, I like the color palette. I
Mhm.
like the discipline of it.
Mhm.
But yeah. Uh yeah. So those were my thoughts on Luna's art. I continue to appreciate it. I'm very aware of now of some of the uncanny valley nature of it. Um but I'm fairly certain this is do you think Luna works digitally?
I would guess so. I would guess so. That this looks like it's all
That's
it's
how I
all color
feel.
and shaded digitally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But there are people who they will draw like
Yes.
an
Mhm.
ink black and white and then they'll
Mhm.
color it,
Then scanned into a
manually.
colorist who does it
Yeah.
digitally. Yeah.
Um
Absolutely. This does
so
feel all digital, 100%.
but all I was gonna say is I feel like if I met Luna at a convention and I commissioned a little sketch, I think it would look exactly the same as the way the characters look here. Not the colors and everything, but just like the way the faces look
Yeah.
feels
Probably.
like
Mhm.
exactly the same as how he would pencil on paper.
Yeah. Definitely so. I think that's probably right. Mhm.
Um, yeah. So, I mean, what jumped out at you in this volume? I think this is a very natural second act. I think it's where we
Yeah.
projected,
Yes.
if you'd never read it before, you would expect an Ada centric
Yeah.
5 issues, and I think we very much got that.
And I think it's why I enjoy this arc so much more because as we talked about last week, every scene in the first 5 issues in that first arc, Alex is president. He's there for we never leave his perspective. Everything that we the reader see is something that Alex sees. Versus now that Ada has woken up and she is sentient, we start getting little glimpses. And it starts when Alex goes to sleep that first time, right? And we just see Ada sitting on the couch and the lights go off and she's sitting there. And then she turns out and like peeks out the shades. And I guess the assumption is like she does that all night, you know?
Yeah, which is like that seems like your reading time. It's like
Yeah. But at that point, that's like literally night one. She doesn't know what else to do at that point. There's nothing else to go from there. But just getting those scenes, getting the scenes when Alex goes to work, and then seeing her walk out to the backyard. When they go into the forum, and she goes into the private room with the other androids. And at least Alex has enough sense to be like, no, like you should have some things that are yours. I don't need to go with you. And so we get that scene, and we don't know what Alex is doing. He's on the outside. He's sitting in the main lobby of the forum, of the virtual forum. So just getting those Ada centric things, and then obviously when she starts to go on the run, meets up with those people again in real life at the National Mall, and that whole situation with the undercover FBI operatives, agents, and things like that. But just getting that perspective and seeing how she sees the world, seeing it through her eyes and her experience, I think just opens up the story. And I think I enjoyed that so much. Maybe because I don't think Alex is the most interesting character.
That's true, but I think he grew so much here that
He does.
I found him more and more interesting.
Oh, that is true. He's definitely more interesting at the end of 10 than he was at the beginning of 6.
Yes. Well, and because of Ada, because Ada calls him out, like,
Sure. Yeah.
She's like, I do think it's hilarious that she's lived with him for like, I don't know, a week.
Yeah.
And she's already made more progress in dissecting the postmortem on his relationship with Claire than he has.
Yeah.
Which is
clearly supposed to be that's meant to be a shot at Alex. You're meant to be dude, yeah. You're supposed to be like, of course, this should be obvious to anybody else. If it's obvious to an android who's been sentient for a couple days, like why is it obvious to you?
Right. And yeah. So what else hits you here?
But I want to move past this. What did you feel about like when Claire showed up? Did you have any?
I had a little bit of an eye roll that they would like kind of rekindle, or even if they were innocently talking and Ada would come home at 5% power and then just crawl away and be like, what, I'd rather die.
That was that was the setup, obviously. That was the setup right. But I guess I read that and it's just like, we know nothing about her, Claire. We don't even know who she is. And for her to show up and for that to clearly it's meant to land like, oh, Alex is supposed to now reevaluate his relationship with both of these women, and he obviously comes to the idea of like, no, now I'm finally over Claire, and maybe I actually do want to be with Ada. Maybe I played that wrong, but because Claire hasn't been a character and we don't know anything about her, for her just to kind of be like a plot tool to get Alex to the place that it was like he's naturally going to get eventually, like she's just there so he learns the lesson. That didn't land because Claire hadn't been a character. And of course I say that knowing that I don't know how you make her a character without like flashback and him telling some story about here's how we met and what we were, blah blah blah, and here's how we broke up and things like that, which I don't know if that probably takes you out of the story you're trying to tell. So I don't know if there's a good way around that, and there may not be, but that landed like a complete thud for me. You're just like, okay, this is only here to get Alex to realize the error of his ways. And so it's a part that I can be like, okay, I don't need to. None of this is actually important to me because this is Alex just going through therapy now.
I was a little more. I mean, like, well, first of all, if you don't like character's going through therapy, then I don't know how
Yeah.
you watch any Aaron Sorkin things because it's like they always are either in a deposition or a counselor's office
Okay. Okay. Okay.
because
All
it's
right,
a
all right,
great way
okay.
to just do character development and microwave it.
Fine. Fine. But the interaction, the conversation he has with Ada before she leaves, that's also a form of therapy. That is
Right.
interesting because he's being called out on it. And the scene with Claire as a follow-up scene is him realizing that she's right. So maybe that's what I'm kind of bumping on. Is like, well, he was told the lesson from Ada. She leaves, and it takes Claire to show up for him to realize and understand it, and kind of go through it, to actually go through it, and not just hear it, actually like process it
Well,
and
I think
internalize it.
yes, internalized. That's the word I was
Yeah,
going to say because he's internalized it, and I think he's such a conservative, defensive guy
yeah,
that, like, you know, as soon as conflict, he just retreats into his shell,
100%.
and and then he was discounting because he was like, "I'm having a 1 week old lecture of my own life. I'm not going to tolerate this,"
Yeah,
and which I think is fair. Yeah, I think it reminded me of the very Joss Whedon joke at the end of Age of Ultron
yeah. I was
where
born yesterday.
yeah, he's like, "You're unbearably naive." He's like, "Well, I was born yesterday."
Yeah.
Um,
Alex also goes to the very thing of like, the like the lowest hanging fruit of like, well, you're just saying that because you're programmed to,
yeah,
not
which is
and
like,
and not knowing if that's entirely true at all, because he has, I don't care if you live in the side or not, you have no idea how a fully sentient AI brain works. I don't think anyone does. And so to make that jab, it's obviously meant to be an insult. And you know,
well, but I don't
she
think it
calls
was
it,
meant to hurt. It was just meant to be like a shot across the bow, like a back off.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
we
she
don't
calls him
talk
out on
about
it.
me, we
She
talk
calls
about
out
you.
on it. She calls him out on it immediately. But it's that sort of thing of, yeah, you're right. He, as soon as there's any sort of confrontation, you get the sense that he automatically retreats and turtles up, and is just trying to like minimize damage. You know, he's just trying to get out of it. He's trying to exit out of the conversation any way he can. If that means ending things very poorly or whatnot, so be it. But he doesn't want to be in an extended back and forth. It feels like he doesn't want, because that forces him to examine him and the choices he's made, and all of that. And he doesn't seem to be someone who has any desire to be introspective.
Yeah, well, and it does seem like it reminded me of when when she asked like basically what happened between him and Claire.
Mhm.
Uh, this is like we're gonna give people alcohol poisoning if they're doing the West Wing drinking game. But it reminded me of the State of the Union episode
Mhm.
where Sam had
His
to
ex,
take his
yeah,
ex-fiance around.
yeah,
And every time someone asks like what happened, and they would all make a joke. It would be like,
yeah.
is it because your last name would be hyphenated?
Sherborne, Seaborn,
Yeah, Sherborne Seaborn or something.
yeah.
Or like the monogram, you wouldn't have to change
Yeah.
monogram towels or so. It's like he would just always say, that's because she didn't like me very much. And
Yeah.
at the
Or
end of
I
the
don't really
episode,
know. Yeah.
yeah, he's like, I don't know. She didn't like me very much. I wasn't cool enough. And at the end, she's like, dude, you're full of crap and you
Yeah.
think too little of me.
Yeah.
And it was a really great,
It's a great episode
in a
too.
show that,
Yeah.
at least for the first few seasons, didn't have a lot of great female characters not being tropey female characters. It was a really great
Well,
one-off moment.
ones that weren't named C.J. Craig and played by Allison
Exactly.
Janney.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
There weren't a lot of guest stars like that. But no, that's it is it's a very tropey male trait to give the guy, right? At the breakup, like, I don't know why it happened, which
right.
is that's a big banner to be like,
It's been 4 years and I haven't really thought about it
yeah, yeah,
other than the same thought over and
yeah,
over again.
that's a big banner of like, this dude's an idiot, he screwed up. Like, we're gonna find out, probably all his fault, but he doesn't understand why, or he's not willing to get his mind around why,
Yeah.
like it's
I mean,
yeah.
it's basically the same exact thing happened in Parks and Recreation, where Tom Haverford gets a new girlfriend after and Ron starts dating his ex-wife from his green card marriage,
Yeah.
and she breaks up with him, and he's like, well, what's this about? And she's like, yeah, you're like clearly not cool with what's happening over there, and it's not okay. And then like the next episode, he said something to along the lines of like, he's like, yeah, whenever like you break up with a girl and people ask why, you just say she's crazy. And he's like,
Yeah,
at least that's what they do on Entourage. And I was like, oh
yeah,
my God.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
the most unbearable example of masculinity.
Exactly,
Um,
exactly. Yeah. So it's not surprising that Alex is this kind of character, right? I think and we saw that this kind of the person he was, the life he was living in volume one. So all of this stuff tracks.
yeah, and I think, but that like I think I find him interesting because I think there is a uh there's like there's a certain level of like vanity to his type of like attitude. I think his basic disposition is like, look, I want so little from life. Like, I just want to like go to work, have a house, have a partner. Really, like I don't have great ambitions. Like, why does everything have to keep sucking and hurting? Like, can't I just minimize pain and just go through life with
Mhm.
like a modest level of happiness? I think that's all he wants, and I think he thinks the fact that the fact that I think he feels entitled to it because he's like, well, I'm not asking for a million, millions and millions of dollars. I'm not asking for great wealth. I'm not asking to marry a model.
Yeah.
I'm only asking for this. Why does life have to still keep kicking me around like this?
That's a good way to put it. I like that a lot.
Well,
This
I relate
idea.
very deeply to that because every time we're faced with like a life decision, I'm like, yeah, sure. There's like a 90% chance that it'll go right. But like, I really, you know, I'm not a super ambitious person and I would rather not like gamble what I have, when I'm
Yeah.
generally
Yeah.
happy enough with what I
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good read on him is that he is. Oh, I think it goes back to what we talked about last week about him clearly fearing change of any sort because he's found a level of comfort, or he had a level of comfort and he lost a part of that was Claire, and so he's still in this. He has everything else. He still has his house, his job, and things like that. But there's something missing there. He's like, well, if I can get that part back, then everything's going to be good. If I can replace, if I can do this one thing,
Right.
then
Just
I'm
do a
good.
clean cut and
Yeah,
paste.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm not asking for more. I'm not asking to be part of some larger revolution here. I'm not looking to be a voice for robot rights, anything like that. He
But he has that pesky moral center too,
yeah, and
where
I
like,
think he genuinely. Well, I think we didn't talk about this last week though a little bit. We did not. I think he genuinely goes to the forum to wake up Ada from a standpoint of good intention. You know,
I completely agree with you. And I think I was like, when the robots in the forum were kind of being mean to him and talking to him like he was an oppressor,
yeah,
I'm like, he got this like a week ago. He
yeah.
didn't choose to have it. It was dropped on him, and here he is already. Can we get a little praise for this guy's
Well,
like
but
good intentions and morality
I think
instead of
that
just
comes.
crapping on him?
Well, I think that also comes down to the idea of there's a version of this kind of person who comes in there who thinks he's the hero.
Yes, yeah.
I'm doing this for
And
her,
and he
or
probably
I'm
had a
doing
little
this
bit
for
of that.
him. Yeah, that I'm doing this for this robot because I'm going to save them. Whether there is a kind of a savior complex there that you could understand that the other robots in those forums, other people in those forums would have experienced a lot of. And so, yeah, they're probably on edge. They're probably wary of that when someone comes in who they've never seen before. And the first thing is like, hey, I'm looking to figure out how to unlock this robot, you know, like haven't been lurking, haven't been around, brand new person shows up and is like, yeah, I'm looking to do this. Yeah, I think it's understandable to question their motives. And I said, I do think he is genuinely from a solid place there, but a little part of him, I think it is that little hero complex. Because as we talked about last week, right? He's never done anything wrong before. Clearly, he's someone never broken a law. Like we said, never stolen anything, even the smallest thing in his life, never done anything wrong. And so the idea of doing something just a little bit wrong here, is exciting. The idea of coming in and being a hero, maybe a little bit exciting. It's a little bit there.
Well, and it's more than he gets anywhere else because it seems like
Yes,
he
yeah,
doesn't really get any fulfillment from work. He even said
well,
something in this series about like how uh
yeah,
is like, yeah, might want to do something else, but didn't really seem to have any drive or passion or any other ideas.
That's right. That's right. They had asked him about his job, and he's like, "Yeah, it's a job." He's like, "What? Did you enjoy it?" It's like, "Do I have to?" It's like, "I need food. I got to pay mortgage." Like
And she was like,
need,
"How
yeah,
exciting!" And
yeah.
he's like,
I need
really
money for
not.
goods.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really not. Yeah, yeah. So, but I
That
think,
being
yeah,
said, let me just say, I went to my friend's birthday party over the weekend. He's a little older than me. He just turned 43, and we all kind of realized we were guys. I well, we realized we were all guys between the age of 35 and 43,
yeah.
and we started. A few of us started talking about our mortgage interest rates that we got in 2020, and then it was just like we were all like geeking out about finances, and I was like, oh yeah, like my house is gonna be paid off when my daughter's a freshman in high school, which is the same year my student loans get paid off, and they were just gonna be making bank.
Yeah.
And compound interest. It was like once compound interest came up, like this is dudes having cigars and beers on a Saturday night,
the
and we're
first
geeking out
time,
about compound interest. Yeah.
the first time this happened with me and my friends, the friends I've known since high school, whenever we get together or whatnot, it might have legitimately been like 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, where we're just sitting around hanging out like anything else, talking about whatever, like we always do. And then before you know it, yeah, like we're talking about interest rates and more, and at some point he looked around, is like, what the hell happened to us?
Yeah. Well,
But
and
also,
I would say
but
if that happened to you at 33, you were definitely on the front end of that.
yeah, yeah. Well, well, I mean, because we are a little older than you, but it was a matter of like, it was this combination of like, God, what happened to us? But also, let's go back to that. What were you saying
Yeah,
earlier? Like
yeah,
that sounded really good. Let's run that back.
right.
That seemed like good advice. So I didn't know.
No, I
So
was very proud of. So I was explaining to someone, I was like, look, I was like, I could pay off my student loans faster, but they're a 5.6 rate compounded annually, and the whole market index grows at 11.9% compounded monthly, and I would lose 5 to 7 years of 12% compound interest in order to pay off something that's costing me 5.6% annual interest. I'm like, I think I'm better off putting money in both buckets and letting, making the money as fast as I can while paying down the thing. And then once the thing's paid down, divert all that money over to, and then you're really, yeah. But it was just like, and this was, to be clear, this is, I think 12, 13 guys. I knew two of them, but like once compound interest came up,
yeah,
we're like all, and I was like, wow, what lives we live. I went to a lot of friends' birthday parties with beer and cigar in my 20s, and none of this came up.
yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. At some point, you turn a corner, and now that is what you talk about there, and that seems like the kind of person that Alex would be. 1,000%.
How old do you think Alex is in this book? I don't think it says.
Really good question. He's got to be. Wait, he has a birthday in the first.
He does. I don't have my book in front of me, but I have a number in my head. I just want to know how close my number is to yours.
I feel like he just turned 29.
Ooh, I was gonna say 31.
Okay.
So yeah.
so you had him. He's probably just over 30, and he's feeling this way.
I think he was engaged at 29,
and I had him. He's just under 30.
And then it felt like a step backward when he turns 30, and you get that quarter life crisis, which
okay.
Yeah. Oh, and when people turn 30 and say they're having a quarter life crisis, I'm like, do you know what your projected age is?
Yes, yeah. Do you know how math works?
Do you know what a quarter of is?
That's interesting because I had the exact same rationale, but the idea of his life is now at 29, he feels like it might be over.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So okay, I just flip back. It just says happy birthday. There is no
candles or anything.
Yeah, there's cards. Nothing there.
Yeah, Luna's not really that kind of Easter egg artist. Well, it's like I don't think you have the liberty to do that if Sarah Vaughn did not give you the age, right?
Well, I mean,
you couldn't just put number of candles on a cake.
They're doing that together. So this is something that they thought of and conceived together, especially on the character front. So I'm sure they have an age in mind for what not just Alex but his whole friend group is, which are all probably about the same age. I think he says the one girl with the bakery, the who Ada's house she goes to when she's running low on power, like been a friend since college. So I'm sure his friend group is all around the same age. But yeah, we're in the same ballpark. I think we're in the same ballpark.
Yeah, you're either right before that cliff of 30
Yeah,
or right
or right
after.
after. Yeah, yeah,
And I have like some younger friends that are, have just recently turned 30 this year. And I'm like, I don't think I was so dramatic about it when I turned 30. Like they're all acting like this is some significant landmark. Dad and I really love bursting people's bubble when they're like, my 30th year is going to be a crazy one. I'm like, well, to be clear, you turned 30.
yeah.
Like you've already done your 30th year. You're in your
Yeah, yeah,
31st
yeah.
year now.
It's like how we count minutes in soccer. Yeah, the 15th minute is when it says 14 in front of the clock. So
Right. Well, or the classic millennium debate,
yes,
you know,
absolutely. Years
which I
things
think
started.
we got into immediately with Paper Girls
Yes, yes. Oh,
because there was the Y2K.
yes, yeah. It
Yeah.
was the first time we saw it. So that might have been like volume 2 of that. But no, yeah. Decades, centuries, they start on one and end on zero. That's how this works. And we don't need to go into that again. We don't need to visit that.
Yeah.
So
If you want
is
to
there?
hear a drawn out debate where I think we actually did have different sides on that,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, because
I think that's probably I think you're right. It's Paper Girls Volume 2.
it's early paper girls. Yeah, there's two ways. There's the way to define it culturally and the way to define it actually by counting. Like which decade are we in right now?
Right.
Those two things are completely different. And there has to be a differentiation there. And one of them has to be absolute in terms of like if you're saying which century, which decade of the millennium are we in, that has to be absolute. And it's because there is no year zero, folks. If you understand that, everything makes sense. You literally then just have to count. But anyway, we don't need to go back into that. Um, one thing that really stood out, I think it maybe my two favorite sequences in this volume are the two interactions he has with his two neighbors or people on his street.
Yeah.
Be,
Both
be,
of them, I
because
was just like,
well,
oh, holy
they're
homeownership association.
well, so this is my question, and this actually dovetails into what we were just talking about compound interest. I thought about that, and the his next door neighbor is named Jody. She's the one who encountered Ada in the backyard, and when as she was talking, and she's very like you get the super like NIMBY kind of I don't mind them, just not here kind of thing, a vibe from her. But I was wondering, I was like, does Alex have is he part of an HOA? Because I guarantee you, if he is, they've got some sort of bylaw in there about robots. They have to like
Yeah, if you have something about like the height of grass, you certainly have something
exactly
about
exactly
the
yeah
maximum level robot you're allowed to have. It's
or
like
no, no,
his like little cooking assistant is fine.
I was thinking more of like, do you need to tell people like if it's a certain
Oh yeah, there's like a
are you
disclosure.
are you required to something like that? And it's weird. I had this flash. One of my neighbors several years ago after they moved in for the they moved in next door to me. They maybe like the second or third time I ever spoke to them outside of saying hi, welcome to neighbor the first time. He came up to me. He was like, "Hey, just by the way, like, just out of curiosity, any issues with the dog down the street a little bit?" And I had to think like, which dog are you talking about? He's like, "There's a pit bull down there," and I
Oh
was
my
like,
gosh.
oh yeah, there is a pit bull. How about that?" I hadn't really thought about that. I had to think about which house that was. Like, oh yeah, there is a pit bull, and I thought, well, no, there has not been an issue as far as I know of, and I didn't know the people who lived there at the time, but I was like, they've got like 3 kids under the age of 10, so guessing probably not an issue. And my neighbor was like, "Oh, all right, cool, no problem," and hasn't come up again. It hasn't been an issue.
Well, that's nice. Yeah.
But the idea that he saw that and was like, I wonder about that. But for me, I have a little bit of like pet breed blindness. Like I got a neighbor. They've got 3 really really small like toyish dogs. They're the exact same breed or whatnot. I see them almost every day, either walking to, like leaving the house and coming to it. I couldn't tell you what kind of dogs they were. Like I don't know. And the fact that when he said the pit bull, I was like, oh, right, that is a pit bull. Like I knew what house it was. I see
Right.
that every day because their house is right next to the entrance drive. So you drive past them and it's either in the yard or there's a window on the side of their unit. And that's clearly where the dog just sits there all day and looks out the window. So I drive by it every day, but it never registered to me that like, oh, that's a pit bull. And it never came up to me. Never the thought never occurred to me to like, do you got to tell people you got a pit bull? It's like, no, it's a dog, you know. But because of reputation,
Right.
right? Because of the stories people think and associate with pit bulls, it it's a believable concern. I think it is
Well,
completely unfounded, but and
right,
it's
because
irrational.
of the things people feel entitled to know as well.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah. Because
uh,
if you had a giant border collie, no one's gonna be like, that's a border collie over there, you know? Like, you know, if you got a German Shepherd around, no one's gonna be like, hey, you got to tell people you got a German Shepherd, you know?
yeah. Although maybe they should, who knows? But
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
dog
yeah.
breeds at all.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
like,
but if I were to list them all out there, if you're to say which is the one that someone might have an issue with, every single person is going to say Pitbull,
Pitbull. Yeah.
Pitbull, Pitbull. Yeah. And so I thought about that here. I flashed on that when Jody's like, listen, like what you do in your own house is fine, but if she's gonna walk, if it's gonna walk outside, she says if it's gonna walk outside, like you got to let people know. And she's, you know, very much like I'm gonna tell the neighborhood about this and all that. Like the idea that we have the right to know because in her mind, you are putting everyone around you in danger, right? That is what she feels entitled to because of how she views robots and what is it, prime, yeah, prime intelligence, what they call their AI there. um and you know it makes me think about also like a much more hotter button topic than something like a pit bull. Like, are you entitled to know if your neighbors own guns?
Right.
Right, because here, kind of what Jody's basically saying, like what you do in your own house is fine, but okay, so let's say Ada does go crazy and kills Alex and goes on a murder spree. Like, does she only stay in the house? Like, if you own guns legally and all of that, if they go off, like, do they magically stop at your property line? It's that sort of thing, right?
Right.
It's that it's so why is it okay if you just can't see it and I don't know about it? But as soon as it becomes aware that this person that you have this thing, you have brought this into our space, our collective space, as in the, I don't know, their neighborhood or their street or whatnot. You have a responsibility to us because you use the word entitled, because we are entitled to know because we live here too. Is that sort of disclosure something that you have to do? And that all comes down to how you view, in this case, specifically robots.
Well, and your social contract with your, you know, other humans and your
Sure, of
neighbors and
course, yeah,
whatnot.
yeah.
And
Well,
but
but
it's to me, it's like the you know, I find most of those things insufferable. They're always the worst character in every book, show, movie, whatever.
and she clearly is meant to be that. Yeah,
Right.
I'm
And
surprised. I'm surprised. It's probably early for this though. If this book came out a little later, she'd be Karen. Let's be
oh
a
yeah,
thousand
no, her
percent.
name would be Karen. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
it's almost like too on the nose to do that now. But
It's a hat on a hat. Yes.
yeah, I was thinking like I was in a community. This was a neighborhood in Cincinnati, a suburb who shall remain nameless, even though I'm sure this probably applies to more than one.
Probably.
But we wanted to have a bonfire there when I was in high school, and one of the neighbors uh came over with like a stick and handed it to us and was like, "You're not allowed to have bonfires in this community. Here, put some kind of food on the end of this because you're allowed to have a cooking fire in your yard." But
Okay, that story did not go where I thought it was going to go.
no,
That's actually fantastic.
uh, I think, and he was like, and there are sticklers for this. He's like, so just like get a bag of marshmallows, get a single hot dog, just make sure you have something to cook because someone will see the smoke and
Yeah,
knows their way over here. And I
yeah.
was like, wow, I'm so glad I don't live here. I'm just like, yeah. the need to be in other people's business when it's like
yes.
how does a cooking fire not bother my neighbors? It's like, because if
Yeah.
the smoke is like going over to their yard or getting in their open windows or whatever,
Yeah.
that's annoying whether I'm cooking something or not.
Yeah. Well,
So
and,
to make
and if
those
you're
stupid little distinctions,
and if you're worried about a fire hazard, like a
same deal.
fire is fire. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it is the idea of getting needlessly into other people's business 100%. And so I mentioned my two favorite scenes. The flip side is the other neighbor who,
Ugh.
so on one side you have
Which one do you
Jody.
hate more?
Oh,
The
Jody is
neighbors.
Jody is worse because she's intrusive. The other guy is just, you can comically dismiss him, but you say on one side you have Jody who's like, absolutely not, this is terrible, who's so out, and then you got the other guy who's like way too into it. Is like, hey,
And
you
like
want to like
propositioning wife swap
you want to
with
swipe? Yeah, no,
yeah.
exactly. That
Ugh.
guy's so comical. You can ignore him, but Jody and her thing of like, I'm gonna quote out you. I'm gonna rat you out to the, that has larger ramifications. So she's a far worse character. The other guy though, but it is just, I enjoy those scenes because you get those complete polar opposites, right? Of these are the extremes of everyone you're going to meet here. Someone who is absolutely against it and someone who is creepily way into it, you know?
Yeah.
In terms of the kinds of, I guess, extreme reaction you could potentially get.
But I think they're equally harmful to the cause
Definitely, without
personhood.
question. Yes.
And
Because neither
one
one
of
of them
them
see
is
them as people.
bigoted and the other one is like perverse. And I'm
Yes.
like, I don't really want to pick between those two.
No, neither are good. Neither are good.
No, yeah. But I was like, the fact that the dude is just openly in the neighborhood talking about like, yeah, so what's that like?
Yeah.
Describe it for me. I got
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And
I've got an older
if
model. Like I'm looking at, should I upgrade? I don't know.
right,
You know,
yeah.
it's
If you
like
want to
trying out a
swap
car.
sometime, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I've got a 2018. You got a 2024. Like is it's the same model, but like it's newer. Like
Right. They have more leg room in the
yeah. Tell me what's different. Like, do I need the heated seats? Like, is that important? Like, it's exactly that conversation. He's having that conversation.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And no one needs heated seats until you have them.
Yes, that is true. Yeah.
And then once you have them, you're like, so wait, other seats
Although
like don't have this?
I'm not gonna lie though, my folks have heated seats in their cars, live in Southern California. So it's like I don't know what y'all doing with that. But
Yeah,
whatever.
no, I had the heated and air conditioned seats in one car.
Yeah.
And the air conditioned seats are eerie.
They have the AC seats too, I believe, as well. That actually is good.
Yeah.
That one's important, definitely. But yeah, like y'all need heated seats in Southern California. Doesn't get cold. Like doesn't get actually cold. It gets Southern California cold, but not actually cold. So, but yeah, that you're right though. They are different levels of just like terrible.
They're really Ada's exposure to humanity, which she wants to be part of. She wants personhood, wants to be treated as a person.
Batting zero right now, pretty much, except for Alex. Alex,
and like maybe her, like the one friend that came over, but like his group of friends was pretty rude.
But she doesn't know that. She doesn't know that yet. She that's a better experience at the end of this arc when she goes there at a time of need. But at the time, because that interaction was before she was woken up. So I'm actually not really counting that in terms of her post sentience interactions. It's the two neighbors basically. Oh, I get you know what? Alex's grandma, pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, she's good. Well, and which is interesting because I thought of her as possibly like a little, just like a little bit of like on the side of the oppressor, not someone who's like actively seeking out to do harm, but someone who just isn't thoughtful enough. But the fact that she immediately picked up on Ada's sentience was like, oh damn, she's tuned in.
I do think what's interesting though is that she even admits like the only reason she picked up on it is because she spent so much time with her own X5.
Yeah.
So because of her personal experience with that model, which is a weird thing to say, but with specifically that version of the android, so she understands and she's already aware probably even on a subconscious level of what the reaction's supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to feel like, what it's supposed to sound like. And so anything that's slightly different, which as good as Ada can try and mimic that, there's no way it can be perfect. That only someone with that sort of with that sort of life experience with robots, that one-on-one experience would really get. Implying that maybe if they had gone to, I don't know, like an actual restaurant or something like that, down in the mall somewhere, that she would have an easier time blending in as an android versus like a one-on-one dinner date with someone that Alex feels safe with, literal family.
Yeah. Yeah, she's an interesting character, and honestly, I don't remember if she comes up in the third act at all. And here I am, like talking about it again as first act, second act, third act in terms of the trades, but it really does feel that way.
It does. Yeah.
Like we've hit kind of the critical point. Although, not to spoil anything, Volume 3, as I recall, covers so much more plot ground.
It does. It covers a lot more ground
1
here.
through 10.
Well, yeah. Well. I mean, even 6 through 10 covers. I talked about pacing last week.
Yeah.
And how I found an issue in that first arc. I think here it works out well because really so much happens here. Because you could have theoretically ended this arc in a number of places, right? You could have ended it when she walks out of Alex's house. You could have ended it when she shows up basically on no battery life at her friend's house. I think it was Beth's, right? You could have ended it there and left that to be ambiguous. Like you don't know, oh, she didn't show up at Alex's house, she went somewhere else. So of course they chose to end it after they get back together, and they ended on the cell phone footage of her at the National Mall. But there were a number of places where you could have used as a cliffhanger, which would have involved stretching out the story that comes before to fill the 5 issues. So I liked the pace and the clip at which this arc moved much better than the first arc. This actually felt like there was forward momentum. Like things were moving in the plot with the characters, which then advances the plot and the overall narrative. So I think it's the reason why I enjoyed Volume 2 much more than Volume 1.
Yeah. I still stand by kind of the slow movement of
Volume 1.
Volume 1.
Sure.
But I agree. This is the pace I want the book going if it's going to keep going. Like the slow burn thing can work for 5 issues to get you off the ground, to get you acquainted with the world and the characters, and you kind of start to feel comfortable in the world, and then the plot takes off because you've already built the world.
And this volume feels much more like we're telling a story per issue versus that first arc, which feels like
this is breaks. Yeah,
this is one story told over 5 issues. Here, it feels like you're getting distinct beginning, middle, ends in each of these issues, and we're ending them in very discrete spots. You're right; it's a good word there. A very specific, discrete spot that leads into the next part of the story. And so I think that pacing for me feels better because that's more what I'm used to when it comes to reading comics.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, especially indie comics, right?
It's
like
even superhero stuff from the big two. The idea of when you pick up an issue, it's the complaint that a lot of TV critics have about television, right? When someone's like, it's like an 8-hour movie, and most TV critics are like, no, damn it, it's 8 discrete stories telling one overall story. Like the episode matters. There should be a beginning, middle, end in each episode. And the fact that you keep conflating those terms and talking about comics, I don't think is a bad thing, because I think story in this medium should be doled out the same way. Like if it comes out in single issues, if it comes out in floppies, that floppy, even if it's the middle of a 95-part story, that should be one discrete story. I should be fulfilled and have an understanding of where we start, where we get to, and how we get to the end of that issue. That should be one story that's part of the larger story. It shouldn't just be we're going to stop right here because this is 22 pages. And it felt in a lot of ways that first arc was like that, where the whole point was just to get to her waking up, and there wasn't enough story in the middle to have those. There weren't enough um waypoints in the middle to say here's end of chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 or whatnot, which is what I feel we are getting that in volume 2.
Yeah. Okay. So I found the internet reference that I was looking for.
Okay.
Because this is like, uh, this is from February 14th, 2021,
Okay.
which you will remember the discussion at the time. IndieWire tweeted this commentary. After 6 episodes, WandaVision still feels far too much like an inflated feature film that just keeps dragging out its story via inconvenient weekly installment. Here's why. And the person that quoted this tweet said, television. You are describing television. And that's like, it's like an all-time Twitter Hall of Fame for me.
Yeah.
Because one, that's first of all, typically my complaint with television is I'm like,
Yes.
like they sometimes abuse the, like what I like about film is there's an economy to storytelling. Like you can tell any story you want, but you kind of have to do it in like 90 minutes to 3 hours. Whereas television, sometimes they feel like, well, we have 10 hours, so we might as well.
And especially in this day of streaming and binge drops.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And, I mean, and then you go back and look at like, the West Wing 22, 24 episodes because they had to. Like
any of those shows, any lawyer, doctor, cop show. It's why you can go through and be like, that episode kind of sucked.
Yeah,
it's because they needed to put something in there. Yeah. You have those issues because that's what the constraint was, and that you have a break in between. But with the idea of like, well, someone's going to sit down and watch this for 12 straight hours, so we're going to give them one story across all of that. And I know so many TV writers and critics that I follow and read, people like Alan Sepinwall, Dan Feinberg, Mo Ryan. These are names that if you are into like TV recap culture around things like The Sopranos or The Wire or Lost or something like that, those are names people are going to know. They all lament the idea of the quote unquote 8-hour movie or 10-hour movie or whatever it is,
right?
Because they want episodes of television. They want those discrete stories.
That being said, how much more ridiculous is that quote when considering WandaVision, which like had harsh thematic shifts from episode to episode? Yeah. It was like, it was literally not doing, you could not have done that as a feature film.
That was the basis of that show, was that every episode
was an
was
homage
a different
to
era of television. Yeah.
And this person just literally hates television.
Yeah.
This is like the main point of the critic.
Exactly.
IndieWire's not like a nothing,
No, they're
that's
popular
not like
enough.
a troll website.
Yeah. But that point still remains in terms of how you dole out storytelling, especially in over the last, God, at this point, I was going to say 5 years, but that's only 2019. Like we're going back to whenever Netflix came into really their own as the place for binge drop TV shows. Even
going back 20 years, it was always unfair, or I think people would tell you that, I think The West Wing got an edge over Sopranos for a lot of Emmys because people respected the 24 episode mandatory format, and The Sopranos had the first wave of prestige television, where 10 episodes, 1 hour episode, no commercial breaks.
All those HBO shows, all the premium cable shows had that disadvantage to begin with, because that wasn't what television was. Television was the broadcast model, and they were very slow to change and adopt that and come to see there was something else there, because then you got the shows on FX, and you got the shows on AMC, which were the same level of prestige, but they still had commercials and stuff, but you weren't doing 22, 24 episodes a year. You weren't on that same kind of grind, and that's when things slowly started to change. And so that's mid-late aughts, right? Early 2010, somewhere when that shift starts to really happen. But yeah, it was slow to react, because they the academies like that institutions like that, they fear that kind of change because this isn't how it was done, and now that is, and now you don't have any broadcast shows.
Well,
A
I
show
mean,
like,
I think they're still out there puttering along for like
oh, no,
retirement homes.
I'm
But
sorry,
yeah,
sorry. You don't have them winning Emmys. They don't have the
yes,
prestige.
I don't know anyone watching them.
Um, you get a show out of the blue like Abbott Elementary or something like that. Like, oh, the half-hour sitcom,
Right,
broadcast
yeah, like
sitcom
Brooklyn Nine-Nine was
had,
like
yeah,
the
there was
last desperate Hail Mary before going to the good place.
yes, there are, but those are few and far between. Like, um, none of the hour-long procedurals that are on any of the networks get any sort of critical praise to the point where like they're award shows. Like that's not even a thought. It's almost like you put them out there because you got to have something on television at between 7 and 10 o'clock,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's about it. So it has changed so wildly, but that idea of, and so I to steer this back into comics here, the binge drop though that can exist in comics, that's called an OGN.
Right.
That's an ultra graphic novel. So that is when Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips say they're putting, like, they got a new book coming out as we're recording this, come out later this year, called Houses of the Unholy. That's a full story right there. So wherever they put breaks, because they're going to be breaks and chapters or whatnot, that doesn't need to be a full story or anything like that. That can be segments of things because I have the whole story right here. It's designed to be that way. Binge drops of television aren't that. Movies are that. If you're telling me there are 7 episodes here, then there better be 7 stories. And if you're really good, there's 7 stories that add up to one really good story. And that's very, very hard to do. And I understand that. I'm not saying it's easy to do, but that's what the medium should be, right? Like that's what television should be ultimately. And that's what comics should be. And so when I get these single issues, I need to be engaged for this issue. And regardless of what it's trying to do in the overall story, this individual thing here, this should be engaging to me. And that should be enough because I like the overall, what's happening overall in the world, to pick up the next one, to get the next story. Even if it's the next part of what I'm reading, that thing should be a discrete story. And that's what I want. That's what I want and what I look for in comics. And I think maybe that's why almost all of my favorite comics are anthologies.
That
Like
is
if
a
you
good
ask
point.
if you ask me what my favorite comics of all time are, and if you go to storiedarcs.com and check on like the bio page for us, we list some of them there. I believe all
I
my
think I
top
could
4.
wait. Can I name them?
Sure, yeah,
Astro City,
it's up there. Mm-hmm.
Sandman.
Mm-hmm.
There's one other huge one that I'm it's like right on the tip of my tongue. All right, you got to give it to me because
I'm pretty sure my top 4 were, well, Sandman, favorite comic of all time. Number 1, never going to change. Number 2 is Criminal. It's an anthology. That's Brubaker and Phillips.
Yeah.
That's never going to change. 3 and 4 will change depending on the day you ask me, but they're always the same 2. It's either Astro City, Kurt Busiek, Brad Anderson, and Alex Ross, and Fables, Bill Willingham.
I knew Fables. I was thinking Black Sad.
And
but again, same deal.
Black Sad that's a case of the week kind of thing, and those come out in big, like oversized, like novella style. But yeah, it is very similar. Like here's another case for John Blackson, another case here, and there are through lines you can see because characters recur and things like that, but they're individual cases of him because he's a private eye, just happens to be a cat, but those stories appealed to me because I get something in that world because I want to be there. And so I think that's why those are the ones I always return to, because I can always jump into, you know what, I love this run right here. I'm going to read this story right here. I want to read this part from volume 17 or whatever it is, if it's something long like Fables or Astro City. And so I search that out when going to other comics that are, telling one long story, something like Saga, which we always come back to a lot because it is one of the best comics being produced right now, maybe one of the best ever. It's literally called Saga. That's the name of the story. You're getting this one huge arc, but each one of those issues is so good and they're focused, and you're getting something out of that. And each one of those single issues is part of an arc that's 6 issues long. So it's one issue versus that's part of a 6-issue arc, and each one of those 6-issue arcs is eventually going to be part of an 18 volume run, 108 divided by 6. Yeah, yeah. So it breaks down like that, but the story works each time because Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples are essentially geniuses at this stuff. You
Right.
know, that it works so well. And so when it's working at the highest level, that's the result that you get. That's the product you get in your hands that you go to the store every Wednesday, like a maniac, like I do. That's what you're looking for. That's the ideal of this medium to me.
Yeah. All that to say, this is improving as it goes in terms of pacing,
Yes.
but I mean, it almost has the thing where it's like, should this have been 3 OGNs or, you know, like there's always infinite ways to parse and say, could it have been this? Could it have been this way? Could it have been this way?
I think
the fact that you thought the whole first story could be one issue.
Or the majority of one issue, yeah, one oversized issue. So like 2 issues worth of stuff. Like maybe it's like a 50-page oversized special number 1, something like that. I mean, you could absolutely probably condense this down, trim some of the fat out of it, and it could be a nice, slightly oversized OGN. You know, probably get it down to like 150, 180 pages, something like that. You could probably tell that story really, really tight and hit all the major points, and it would still work. And you could then have some flexibility about when you reveal things, when you hit certain mileposts and whatnot. But I do agree with you 100%. It is getting better. The character work is getting better. The exploration of character is getting better. The pacing is getting better, and the story is far more interesting. And to me, all that goes back to finally having our second title character be a character.
Yeah. Which honestly, I'm thinking about this in single issue, which I didn't, read in single issue. I don't have any of the single issues.
And neither did I.
It's a big ask, right? To say,
yes,
crawl with us through these first 5 issues.
Yeah.
And it'll really get going in issue 6.
Yeah.
And there may have, I can't remember, did they publish 15 straight months in a row, or were there breaks?
I think the way it was came out, I think I mentioned this in the Zero, was they came out at about 6-week intervals. So it's like every month, and then maybe 1 month that comes out in the final week. And so then it quote unquote skips a month because 6 weeks later is the first week of the following. So, but they came out at about a 6-week clip all the way through, consistently through. So it was always on the shelf at around the same interval every time. So they did not have any big breaks. There was no hiatus. There wasn't like, here's the first 5 and then there's a 3-month gap or anything like that. These books were coming out on a regular pace.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm very excited, to dive into volume 3 and, have the spoiler ban lift to be able to talk about the whole thing at once.
Yeah.
And just like the breakneck pace we moved to.
Let's end on this question then. Do you like what they've set up here in terms of, you knew it was against the law to have a sentient robot, for anyone to make sentient robots and to own them, whether they gain sentience or, again, as we know, that you unlock it because it already exists. You knew that was a danger, that was against the law, but now we're ending at a point where not only is there a announced government crackdown, but now Ada is a specific wanted person robot.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good writing in that you really paint yourself into a corner that you have to write out of, because had it been like, oh, that spooked her and she came back home and it was basically like that whole side adventure never happened, and they could just choose to go back to what they were doing before, which was hide from the neighbors, whoops, they know about that. But now, nosy neighbor knows what she looks like.
Yeah.
She's watching the news for all her robot scare hype. And it's like, this is not going to go well. This is not sustainable. I don't know why he mentioned Alaska, other than maybe he was just saying that's the furthest place away I could think of.
Well, they're in Washington, D.C., so it's, although Alaska is pretty far from just about everything. But yeah, no. So you like the direct focus, the fact that they said, like, now that this video is out and it's been broadcast, there is effectively only one end to this, right?
Well, there's
sorry,
it forces action. It's the characters have to be active now. which for Alex, that's his main problem. It's
Mhm.
like if there is a path of least resistance, he will be gliding down that path. And they cut it off. There isn't one anymore. Now that her face is on national
Yeah.
television, she's wanted by the FBI. They have like, drones flying around. And frankly, now with that image, I would think they could contact Prime and say, "Hey, who did you build this one for?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Where
then
was this model
again,
delivered? Yeah.
it does seem like, and the conspiracy came up again when they went to the cafe together to talk about the end of the world, which felt very relatable. It was like, you
Yeah.
want to go get a private room and talk about the end of the world? I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
I've said that so many times this year already.
yeah.
It's crazy, but uh, the idea that the government doesn't want to poke Prime about it, even though Prime is
Yes.
ultimately responsible,
Yes.
and like the government's acting like, oh, it's this big mystery how all these robots are gaining sentience.
Yes. Yes.
It's
Yes.
being
Yes. Yeah.
added after the fact. It's like, yeah, that would be incredible if
Yeah.
people were able to take existing hardware and add sentience. That would
Yeah.
be nuts.
Yeah.
That would be scary.
Yeah,
The fact that they're already
but
sentient and blocked makes a lot more sense.
yeah, that actually, if people found a way to add sentience to androids to this prime intelligence, that's actually a larger problem in my mind than the sentient robot they've created. Like if people could do that and add it to it versus simply removing like the restrictor plate off of there, yeah, that's a whole other kettle of fish of problems. So yeah, it does bring it. Yeah, you're right, that conspiracy aspect, that kind of undertone there. And I like what you said there about um, it forces the action, which is great for storytelling, but specifically for the character of Alex. Because I guess at this point he has two choices, right? He either turns her in and implicates himself, or goes like he only has two options, right? He's got to stick with her or ditch her. Like
And he
there's
is probably screwed to some extent either way. Because if she
ex-
goes out on her own, gets caught,
yes,
it will get
yes,
traced
it
back to
comes back.
him.
Yeah, so you understand what direction he's going to go, but I think again the way you've read the character is perfect, and that the idea of this is something he would never do on his own. He would never act. He doesn't want this, but now he's in a position where he has to act. And so, what does the person who is so reticent to act do when he's put in that position and has to go? There is no other choice but forward. He has to do this. He has to see this out. He's got to play this out all the way to the end. What does that do to someone like Alex, given everything we've seen about him through the prior 10 issues? Again, I said episodes as well. I I I agree with you. I like that setup for, again, a character that I just said a little while ago, earlier this episode, I didn't find all that interesting because I don't think he's that interesting in terms of what we've seen so far. But he's
Right.
being put in a place now where he has the potential for what his actions
But he's
are
kind of meant
going
to be the
forward.
boring everyman, and
Yeah,
he's the perfect that.
yes, and
Um,
that is probably intentional as to why he's pretty milk toast and um kind of so predictable. Is so when he is forced to make a choice and he is forced to make this turn into decisive action one way or the other, it is compelling for him because you don't know, and he doesn't know how he's going to react because this is obviously a new thing for him. It's not something he would ever consider doing, and a thought that probably never even ever crossed his mind of how he thought his life might go, even with an android in his life, and even after Ada was woken up. Like even after that, I don't think he ever fully comprehended that it could get to this point that it is now. It was never a
right.
scenario in his mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I go back to I think about this probably more than anyone in the world. There was an interview with the Russos between Infinity War and Endgame, or maybe it was like Endgame had finished shooting, but it wasn't out yet, and people were asking them about like all their long ball planning and stuff like that, and they were like, honestly, we did not know how we were going to get out of the jam. We just wanted to leave the most interesting combination of pieces on the board for us to be able to write our way out, because that's how we write our best creatively, is when we're painted into a corner
Yeah.
and we have to do drastic things and the characters have to do drastic things and take big risks, because if they were like, if we were writing too far ahead, it would be too easy.
Mm-hmm.
um and I think this is one of those cliffhangers where it's like, oh yeah, they are not going to be able to proceed the way that they have been going. And I think that, once you hit that point of no return, it's also the indication that you're entering the final act of something too.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if you were to go back through again. I don't think either of us have single issues on this, either digitally or physically. I know I don't. I only have this digitally in the deluxe edition. But I wonder if they had like a letters page or whatnot or anything back there that said like at which point, hey, this will be ending at 15 or anything like that. But even if you didn't know that, this does feel like an end game move. It does feel like no matter what came before, by Ada specifically being called out on the news and ID'd, or at least her picture being broadcast, that is like there is only one way after this. That this only goes towards one direction, which is they're hunted now, and either they escape or they don't. But that's going to lead towards the culmination, the ending of the story. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Anything else to add for volume 2?
No. I think that's all I've got here. Just I'm with you. I'm excited to get to the end and discuss how we get there and where the story ends up. Definitely.
Yeah. And no, I'm not going to tease anything else.
No.
I'm just going to sign off next week. Say, thank you for listening. Thank you for reading. Really hope you enjoy volume 3. I think volume 3 is why we decided to do this series, just because I think, it may not have been clear at the end of volume 1 why we chose this book to talk about. I think volume 2 gave us plenty to discuss in the end.
Definitely. But as we say, we felt that the book has gotten better from volume 1 to volume 2, and so I think that's something you can anticipate going forward, and that the book ends, probably stronger than it starts. But we'll get there next week when we dive in. Absolutely.
So thank you for listening. Please read along and come back next Thursday. And, like, subscribe, give us a review, all that stuff. Share with a friend. Buy the beautiful deluxe edition for a friend. That's the really nice thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Gift that to somebody.
And then stick a Storied Arcs bookmark in it.
Sure.
So anyway, we will see you next Thursday.
Peace.